Music industry. That is something I am not familiar with. Actually, I haven't seen the findings just yet, but rumor has it that Roy Orbison could do more than sing. It lingered, shrouded in mystery, the mysterious man in black inflicted pain on all taken note of. Something peculiar was found in his Nashville house, though, long after the lights went out and the curtain came down. A closed basement entrance lay concealed beneath the flooring, beyond an unoccupied stairs. No one feared to step inside for many years. Old machinery, according to some. Roy kept his secrets from everyone. But when the mansion was eventually unlocked and the door creaked open for the first time, our world would be turned upside down by what we would find within. Since was more than just tape and grime on the walls. Silence was the only way to open the confession. And you won't be able to express yourself after what follows. You could never hear Roy Orbison sing loud. Neither did he flaunt or brag. There was no hotel crash rooms or go after news stories. Silently standing under the limelight, with his eyes concealed behind thick black sunglasses, he let his voice to carry the entire performance, a voice that sang like the pain of losing a loved one. Vernon, Texas was a dusty little hamlet where I was born in 1936. Silence molded Roy's formative years. From the time he was 4 years old, he battled fears, wore thick spectacles, and found solace in music. At the age of 6, he received his initial guitar. He was doing radio performances by 7 o'clock. However, even while Roy sat on the porch by himself, plucking chords and daydreaming about a distant place, while the other lads played ball outside, there was a lot of rejection in his early career. He was not a rockabilly kind of guy. His operatic falsetto left labels bewildered. In 1960, however, when the Only Lonely cracked the globe at last listened attentively, they kept that sound in their minds forever. Roy arose quickly in the years that followed, sung anthems of love and grief while weeping in his dreams and fleeing in terror. Still, not even celebrity status could protect them. Roy had his life fall apart behind closed doors. The year 1966, a motorcycle accident claimed the life of his wife, Claudette. While Roy was on tour just 2 years later, a houseier killed his 2 young sons. Tragedies befell the guy who had sang about them. His friends say he was never the same. Quietly, he began to dress in complete black and he built an impenetrable barrier around himself. During this time, Roy started vanishing into his basement, where he would record, write, and pour his sorrow into real tour machines that no one else ever touched. However, nobody knew this, not even his closest collaborators. Restrictions on release financial gain, purely for emotional reasons. There was no labeling of the tapes, no records of the sessions were ever kept. He was alone with his microphone, and any truth he couldn't bring himself to speak in broad daylight, a secret chamber of agony. A long time subsequent to his demise, that cellar turned into an urban legend, murmurs among fans and collectors. Underneath, he concealed singing. Some would divulge secrets he wished no one would know, but no one could verify their claims. The door remained shut until the day when it was subsequently unlocked. What lay beyond would cause a seismic shift in the music industry. Music lovers lamented the passing of a haunting voice when Roy Orbison died in 1988 at the young age of 52. A deluge of tributes, retrospections, and sales of his older albums ensued, once again into the cycle. However, a different event was unfolding in the background, something much stranger. Barbara, his widow, kept a close eye on his Nashville house, a peaceful mansion nestled in the hills. Nobody was ever allowed to enter the basement by her. Nobody, not even musicologists, nor even close friends or relatives. She refused to reveal what was underneath, what she referred to as Roy's place. Following her passing in 2011, the land lay empty and neglected for some time. At that point, the Orbison estate decided, as part of his will, Roy would have the house restored, documented, and saved. It was decided to send a small archival team to inspect the grounds. They were anticipating vintage equipment and perhaps some unpublished tracks. The hidden entrance was a surprise. Nestled behind an integrated bookcase, a hollow-sounding panel had been located in Roy's former study. It ended in a dirty, dimly lit, unfinished short corridor. A padlocked, reinforced, wooden door rusted shut at the base. The door opened to a concealed basement that hadn't been entered for more than 20 years. Thickness of air, stillness thicker than sound. The boxes, which ranged in age from the mid-1960s to the late 1980s, were carefully labeled by year and arranged from floor to ceiling. Instead of digital drives, indexes, and instructions, all that was present were tape reels, folders, envelopes, and one metal object. "Do not disrupt," noted cases. There were hundreds of real-torial recordings inside the boxes. Some were just marked with numerals. Other people who use cryptic language, such as in Dreams 3 a.m., at the very end, along with the lyrics sheets. There were ripped pages from notebooks and letters, some of which were unsealed and others of which were sealed. After the fact, one archivist remarked that, rather than a music room, it seemed more like a personal time capsule constructed for Roy rather than for the general public, a safe haven for the emotions he was unable to express in front of an audience. The riddle got deeper as they meticulously listed each item. Not a soul had ever heard those songs before. Not only does he articulate themes that Roy never discussed publicly, but he also does it for other reasons, featuring duets with an unidentified female performer, proponents that did not correspond to any known aspect of his discography, including overdubs with the sound of a child laughing in the background. There were lullabies in their confessions. In another, and then there were the love letters, faded and personal, but never sent. Although each item deepened our understanding of Roy Orbison's life, we were never told why he concealed them or why he never uncovered these footprints. The door remained locked. The solutions appeared to be concealed further down. Something unexpected would be found on a cassette that was only marked with the date, June 6, 1986. A faded June date was the only marking on the fragile tape. June 6, 1986. Wrapped in delicate fabric, it was one of the few reels kept in its own metal container. The audio crew cautiously inserted it into the old player and hit play, but the result was nothing like a demo. It had the air of a séance. At first, there was complete quiet, extended period of quiet, a guitar tuned just down from flat, followed by a low-volume buzz. Lastly, Roy's voice, albeit it lacks the soaring operatic croon that was featured in his hit radio songs. The voice sounded tired, soft, quivering, as if summoned from an unknown source he was unsure he desired to return to. As he sung quietly, he confessed an untruth. The group listened in disbelief as the leader finally replied, "I never said her name." They had never heard this song before and have no record of it. Is absent from all published discs. The song's words were honest and vulnerable. A secret connection was detailed by them. He claimed that I was a lady down to my very core, a decision he took to distance himself. The solemn promise to guard her privacy. The tune was tender, heartbreaking, yet unclicked. That type of music you make not because you want to be a chart topper, but because you feel compelled to. Roy Orbison had never recorded something so sensitive. There was a near-minute-long silence when the tape rolled. Not only was there a lack of supporting tracks, without any accompaniment, merely him serenading the shadows, the pattern became apparent as further cassettes were played. In his latter years, Roy composed an entire suite of songs. The emotional burden of what he had endured was carried in private sessions. Bereavement for his wife, Claudette, the terrible inferno that killed his boys. Because of his prominence, he became an outcast. Little by little, the songs told the story of a man who was sick of being a symbol of tragedy and instead wanted to be remembered as someone who had experienced it firsthand. On a few tracks, he would pause, clear his throat, or whisper, "No, not like that." Before picking back up where he left off, Roy halted the video and said, "I miss you." In one session, there was even a faint sound of a child's laughter in the background. You can't call these studio tracks. They served as therapeutic meetings. The sound of an individual's sorrow. Partiality was of little concern to him. He was attempting to bid farewell. These noises were accidentally stored for decades while sitting in darkness. However, these recently discovered recordings show a Roy side that was never intended for the spotlight or the charts. Nothing more than a lone musician, some guitar, and the voices of the dead he never had the chance to bury. An old, yellowed envelope with the words "private" written on it was among the relics, containing more than 22 letters written in Roy Orbison's script and addressed to an unknown individual. The envelopes were delicately folded. On each page, a single initial E appeared as the name, no last name, and no mailing address. However, the tone was undeniably personal. Roy expressed a yearning in these letters that was absent at least in his music, from his songs. Before anyone heard my voice, he spoke of a lady he met. He referred to her as the one individual who detected my lack of speech, reused throughout various entries. Among the shared experiences he recounted were late-night drives through deserted Texas highways and sunny mornings spent listening to her hum as he strung his guitar. Nostalgia wasn't the only thing. Remorse was felt. A heavy, painful remorse. He detailed his decision to leave her side in pursuit of stardom and the road instead. According to one letter, I departed with the belief that I could bring you along. As soon as I boarded that tour bus, though, we were no longer together. In an effort to immortalize her, he mentioned attempting to pen songs about her, in tunes, but yet acknowledging that none of them were comparable. Apologies, half-confessions, and unsent requests to be remembered were all in the same batch of letters. If these ever reach you, he wrote on one of the last pages, I want you to know that you were the inspiration behind every note I sung. No one ever mentions E, who was E, in interviews, biographies, or official documents. She wasn't merely a fleeting inspiration, though. According to the letters, it is possible that she was the initial trauma that impacted his whole life. Voice. An early version of the lyrics to Crying appears in one of the letters. However, the original line used the word E instead of U, which has been crossed out, changed, or buried. These weren't the memoirs of an ordinary man. The man who spoke these words would be unable to rectify the situation in the past, and it seems that Roy Orbison had carried that break even into his final days. Despite his popularity and triumph, the letters were terrible. According to one archivist who read them, if you remove the music, these are the most sincere songs he has ever composed. According to another commenter, I don't know what awaits me beyond this life, but if it's compassion, I hope it leads me back to you. For a guy whose lyrics could shatter glass ceilings, there was an enduring tenderness in the midst of the sadness. Roy's last letter, sent a few months before he passed away, contains a line that continues to reverberate. In the depths of Roy's guarded suffering lay a reel that was different from the others. It was heavier, and its quiet, now shattered by pen and paper, might hold the secret to his deepest song. The enigma of E could hold the key to unraveling this riddle. Finale, not for release. Roy's handwriting appeared on the label, which was inside the case. When the archivists played it, what they heard was an instrumental piece that had been meticulously orchestrated, not a sloppy demo or half-recorded recording. A nearly 9-minute sequence that started with a gentle string arrangement that built to a cinematic swell, as if written for the closing scene of a tragic film. Then came the organ, solemn and swelling. And lastly, Roy's voice. This was unlike anything he had ever published. There were no verses, choruses, hooks, just feelings stretched out in a haunting falsetto that rose and fell like a spirit floating in and out of shape. He wasn't singing, reading lyrics, or really making any noise at all. Throughout the ages, as if he were writing music not for an audience but for the hereafter, Roy's meticulous block script adorned a page of notes that accompanied the recording. This is for the end of things. Another one added, if I don't return to the light, I hope this is the final sound I make. Within the technical notations, you'll find key changes, tempo adjustments, and odd poetic remarks. By minute 4, you should be crying, and the quiet should ache. A last breath isn't sung, yet the memory lingers. This wasn't music written to amuse. It was a farewell message to the world, expressed through chords and air. Some think Roy had planned to add lyrics to finish it, but time got away from him. Others think he didn't want lyrics since words would reduce the scope. One thing was evident, though, this wasn't meant for commercial consumption. Nevertheless, here it was, unearthed from his long-forgotten basement, delicately playing in a room filled with stunned professionals who were afraid to speak, until the last note faded. The work lacked an official title, but archivists, producers in the industry have argued over whether to restore and release it, with some arguing that it should remain private as Roy's last wish memorialized through art. Music historians have subsequently hailed it as one of the most significant unreleased works in American music, a sonic painting of loss, beauty, and departure. Some think the world should hear the most vulnerable moment of a guy who earned a living by putting feelings into music. One thing is certain, though. The recording proved what admirers had believed all along. Roy Orbison was never making music for the radio. Even while he was at the height of his stardom, he was composing for a greater purpose, one that would last forever. In this incomplete work of art, we hear a man confronting the unknown with courage and song. a tune that would lead him through the shadows, rather than with cries for praise, but with a desire for tranquility. After weeks of restoration, the archivists thought they had discovered everything in Roy Orbison's basement. Then, in a long-lost drawer of his old desk, they found a set of yellowed and curled-at-the-edges home renovation plans from 1983, which changed everything again. Not included in any city permit and with no official record of construction having ever taken place, but clearly Roy's, with margin notes of music and little scribbled comments like "must be silent inside" and "where the noise goes away." These weren't merely plans, they were intentions. Underneath the original basement, the plans showed an entirely new underground extension, a 6-sided insulated recording booth, a reinforced vault with fireproof walls, and even a little emergency exit tunnel that led to a disguised utility shed in the backyard. In essence, Orbison had built a sanctuary, his own, hidden beneath his house, in a secret cathedral of solitude that not even his closest friends knew about. Roy would go missing for hours at a time, particularly in the nights. When he returned, he would be glassy-eyed and hum melodies that no one could identify. They mistook his actions for reflection or sadness. But now it was very evident that he was plunging into a self-constructed realm of noise, loss, and recollection. This realm lacked windows and clocks, consisting only of a man, a microphone, and whatever specters he was unable to articulate. Claudette's faded portrait clung to the wall of one corner of the upper room, which had walls coated in black acoustic foam and was lit by subtle amber illumination, typical of confessionals or ancient chapels. Down below, on a worn bench, Roy may have sat night after night, staring at the image as tape reels spun beside him. It was obvious that Roy wasn't merely recording music. He was constructing a vault for his memories, a sanctuary where the past might be spared the interruptions of the outside world. Within a drawer of the vault was a handwritten inventory list detailing the personal belongings of the vault's occupants, including his beloved comic book from boyhood, his father's broken watch, and a solitary plastic-preserved black rose. None of these things were mere props. Rather, they were artifacts, representations of he was a man who had turned his music inward long before anybody else did. Why he kept it secret is still up for debate. Perhaps he was afraid of being misunderstood. Perhaps he believed his listeners were only interested in radio singles. Or maybe he was shielding it from the industry, the critics, and the pain that persistently trailed behind him. One thing is certain. Roy Orbison did more than compose songs about loneliness. He built it into a masterpiece, note by note, beneath the floorboards of a house that everyone believed they knew. The plans, however, reveal an alternative narrative, that of a man constructing his last haven away from a world that has never truly grasped the anguish concealed beneath the spectacles, a world that is only now starting to pay attention. This was the grand revelation, a small wooden box, plain and unadorned, with a dark mahogany lid secured with a brass clasp and a metal plate on top, inscribed with 6 eerie words, was concealed in the farthest corner of the basement vault, behind a row of dusty amplifiers and a stack of distorted vinyl test pressings that lay beneath a canvas sheet. No key was located, and no indication that it had ever been opened. It seemed as though Roy had deliberately left it there, knowing that it would be found at the proper moment. After weeks of deliberation, the team finally brought in Roy's eldest son, Wesley, to make a choice. After a brief silence, he nodded, and the lock was softly burst apart. The 3 artifacts that were inside revealed an unexpected thread. One was a Polaroid snapshot, which was somewhat faded around the borders, but clearly sharp in the middle. In it, we could see a younger Roy, perhaps in his late 20s, smiling alongside a woman and a tiny child. Neither Claudette nor Barbara were pictured, and there was no known relative of the child's. In the photograph, Roy appeared more cheerful than anybody had ever seen him before, carefree and joyful, as if he had temporarily escaped the burden of the world. The second thing was a simple, unmarked audio cassette. When it was, "If you're hearing this, they're gone, and that's okay," Roy murmured, his voice crackling to life in a low, intimate register. "Nobody was supposed to see this side of me. It was intended to be shielded. The recordings you uncovered, this music and these letters were never supposed to be chart toppers or prize winners. The fact was simply this: it is my truth. I put my grief into song because I've been there. However, my love was profound, unassuming, and not always in the limelight." With a moment, he spoke. I was mistaken when I believed I could have it both ways, the road and the home. I've done my best to accept that. Despite its efficacy, music was never sufficient. After a protracted pause, the last line was spoken. Hopefully, someone is still paying attention if you're still here. The cassette paused. Lastly, a folded note made its way into the container. Old ink on 3 plain words. I pardon myself. The air of secrecy was immediately thickened. Which woman and child were those? An estranged family, a new beginning, a goddess who became a mother. Certainty was elusive. Roy Orbison's life was obviously more difficult than his popularity let on. Longing wasn't the only thing he sang about. Around it, he constructed his own little reality. Until death granted him permission, he chose not to disclose it. None of that was in the box. It felt liberating. A last act of honesty coming from someone who was very good at keeping quiet. We may have found the last piece of the puzzle in those few artifacts that allowed us to see Roy for who he really was. A man, a parent, a lover, and a spirit seeking solace in a world that had only ever pushed him to perform. Roy Orbison seemed like he'd seen it all when he sang, sighed of grief and came back to recount the tale. The world looked at him as a sorrowful figure, the solitary crooner, the mourning man in black, for a long time. However, the contents of the basement revealed an alternative narrative. Rather than wallow in misery, he was able to move forward, embracing rather than evading suffering. All of it, the recordings, the letters, the picture, and that last tape. There was no indication of a hidden double life there. They were different parts of the same man the world knew and loved, but they were more whole and relatable. Featuring Roy Orbison on We Were Given flawlessly crafted heartbreak via the radio. With the door locked, Roy revealed the truth to us. Genuine, unfiltered, imperfect, and unrefined. That is the strength of this finding. For many years, admirers attempted to piece together who was hiding behind those shades, and at last, we get it. He embodied the myth and the reality of stillness, the shout and the scar. Not out of shame, but because he held some things in the highest regard, he concealed them. At last, Roy, it wasn't just songs that Orbison wrote. He hid his cherished memories in a secure location that no one except himself could access until now, a vault guarded by music. And it's not only Roy Orbison that we can hear on those last records. A man is speaking now who has always been unable to. Perhaps the most poetic note of all.